Welcome to this week's Movie Math. But before we discuss this weekend's box office, it looks like this Kickstarter is getting real, so let's discuss. I'm sure most of you have seen the headlines, but basically this all started when Warner Brothers told Rob Thomas they'd only distribute his Veronica Mars movie if he could secure half the funding himself, aka $2 million, and he had the clever idea of going through Kickstarter. To some degree, this is kind of genius, because usually movie investors want to see a return on their money. But Kickstarter investors, all 91,000 plus in this case, just want to see a Veronica Mars movie. Within 10 hours of launching their campaign, Thomas & Company met their $2 million goal and ultimately raised $5.7 million, meaning Warner Brothers won't have to put up any cash. Immediately, other canceled cult hit shows began to buzz about starting their own Kickstarter campaigns, like Chuck, but it was Braff that actually pulled the trigger. The Garden State director, whose latest gig was voicing the monkey in Oz the Great and Powerful, asked fans to help him get back behind the camera. Now, the initial plan was for Braff to raise $2 million via Kickstarter and then the remaining $3 million via foreign sales. Plus, Braff and producers Stacey Sher and Michael Schamberg, the duo behind Garden State, Django Unchained, Out of Sight, and Pulp Fiction, planned to work for almost no money up front. But then, within days of launching the Wish I Was Here Kickstarter campaign, Braff and Company hit their $2 million goal. With over 20 days to go, they will likely raise the entire $5 million needed and possibly more. Awesome, right? I'm not sure. On the surface, this seems like a power to the people initiative, where we get to cut out the pesky middlemen studio suits who seem to not know what they're doing. Yet, as I pointed out earlier, why do regular movie investors get to see a share of the profits while Kickstarter investors don't? Shouldn't this be like buying stock? Second, why are we giving them more money than they're asking for? And where is that overrun applied? Does it go toward making a better movie? Or maybe Braff, Sher, and Schamberg get paid more up front? If so, how much? Publicly traded companies have to have transparency when it comes to their financials, yet have either of these movies released their budgets? And will they release their earnings reports when the movies hit theaters? As for this weekend, it looks like audience ticket money went more towards investing in movies than actually seeing them. Yes, while Mark Wahlberg and his Pain and Gain co-stars can shoulder an impressive amount of weight, turns out they couldn't do any heavy lifting at the box office. Sure, Pain and Gain took the #1 spot, and it came out of the gate strong on Friday, with many industry insiders predicting it would overperform. But like steroid users, instead the pick deflated quickly and ended up pulling in just $20 million. Thank goodness that Wahlberg, Dwayne Johnson, and Michael Bay all agreed to work for no money up front, so the pick should still turn a profit. Or maybe not, as the trio will likely gulp it down as part of their back-end deals. 2013 is not off to a good start for Wahlberg, what with Broken City and now this, and has got to be making the studios question how much star power the actor really contributed to mega-hit Ted. As for Michael Bay, this is his first non-Transformers movie since 2005 with The Island, and he appears to have picked up exactly where he left off. What does all this say about Transformers 4? We'll have to wait and see if that franchise is indestructible or if Wahlberg will do a repeat performance of his only other big blockbuster, the Planet of the Apes remake. But one can imagine that with this opening for Pain and Gain, Bay and Wahlberg aren't quite as excited to team up again as they were a week ago. As for the rest of the box office, Tom Cruise choked as well, with Oblivion dropping a little over 50% in its second weekend. It's now unlikely the sci-fi pick will reach the century mark, and while it's doing well overseas, it's also still unlikely it will be able to make back its $120 million budget, not including print and advertising. Once again, remember that the studio only gets about half of a movie's box office haul. Which is why it seems that the stars of The Big Wedding are glad they took their money up front and ran, since the movie debuted in 4th place with just around $7 million. But taking the money and running seems to be the modus operandi for Robert De Niro, Susan Sarandon, and Diane Keaton these days. And one has to wonder why the studios don't get wise to the fact these older stars are lining their pockets while bringing in few dollars at the box office. But you can almost always depend on Jeffrey Katzenberg, who's rebounded wonderfully from last year's Rise of the Guardians with The Croods. This animated pick, in its 6th weekend already, continues to drop around just 30% per weekend, and worldwide has rounded up over $460 million. A sequel is being prepped. Speaking of impressive worldwide numbers, Iron Man 3 opened pretty much everywhere but here and rang up almost $200 million. That's more than the Avengers opening salvo, which was $185 million. And as Tony Stark flies into US theaters this weekend, he's expected to pull in $150 million. All these big numbers only underscore that comic book movies continue to dominate Hollywood, but also how important it is to release them in 3D. Perhaps that's the box office steroid Pain and Gain should have swallowed. And that's the weekend box office. I'm Grace Randolph, and we just did some movie math. As always, thanks for watching, and I hope you'll go beyond the trailer for these other top movies.